This is a big, wealthy town, they say. To be honest, how many of you let out a scream when the final piece of music began? Tommy Egan is still alive, even though his Chicago chapter may be coming to a close. It's time for us all to celebrate it. All bets are off, so getting ready for a series finale is usually a nerve-wracking experience. You can't bank on anything because it's the end of the road and there won't be another hour. We've already experienced this with Power and Power Book 2, Ghost, both of which had mediocre but unimpressive endings. I'd like you to reflect on the endings of each series and describe each one in depth. Good for you if you can. However, as neither was very memorable, you would be in agreement with the great majority of people if you couldn't. Power Book 4, Force Season 3 Episode 10 was a far better ending than those aforementioned episodes since it accomplished exactly what it was supposed to. Perhaps this is just recency bias, but it is. If you have enough time to write a satisfying conclusion, you should try to resolve unresolved issues, provide answers to unanswered concerns, and, most importantly, leave the series with a lasting impression that viewers won't be able to forget if they try. The final scene of the show, Big Rich Town, which features Tommy Egan and Tariq St. Patrick standing on a rooftop before the fade to black, will surely stick in viewers' minds forever. However, there was so much packed into this hour that it's difficult to know where to start before we reach the conclusion. Although they did their best, this series would have benefited from 1 or 2 extra hours so that some plots wouldn't have to stop so suddenly. There was no time for Bobby to engage in some serious back and forth with Janet and Tommy, or for him to play a little game of cat and mouse with Sang after he gained leverage. Every minute mattered because time was of the essence. It was obvious from the start that CBI would face Tommy's motley bunch, and it was exciting to watch the two teams try to outdo one another by going all out. Janet was right about Raheem, of course, but that was a clear sign that no games were being played here. If this had happened in the past, Janet might have tried to give Raheem false information to bring back to Tommy, but he couldn't afford to play chess at that point because they could be in a gunfight at any moment. Instead, he shot Raheem in the head as if it were nothing. Although it was unlikely that Tommy would send Shanti to Janet, their exchange was entertaining since neither of them was a skilled actress and it seemed like they were trying to see how far they could push it until the other snapped. Power Book 4, Force Season 3 Episode 7's irresponsible conversation in the bathroom and Janet's infidelity with Shanti marked the end of their potential relationship, and Janet was astute enough to see it. Regardless of their personal history, Shanti prioritizes business, and the whole incident demonstrated to her that Janet's ego would never allow for a genuine partnership between them. More than anything, circumstances led her to collaborate with Tommy. But during the past few episodes, it would have been good to learn more about Shanti's true feelings on having to work with the man she has essentially wanted dead since we first met. In the cosmos, it frequently occurs that former adversaries are compelled to turn into allies, usually because they have larger, more immediate enemies in common. However, without another season, we were deprived of witnessing what that partnership would have looked like when Shanti and Tommy weren't just partnered together out of necessity. In fact, they made a lot of sense as partners. At the beginning of the season, I never would have predicted Tommy, Shanti, Miguel, and D-Mac to be a strong team, but as the season went on, it felt perfect. However, facing CBI was never going to be simple, especially with their unit fairly well equipped. You could tell the hour was developing into something more than a conflict between two opposing factions based on how it played out. When Tommy eventually arrived in Chicago, he would either receive everything he desired or nothing at all. Since the cartels were a constant threat that loomed over almost every action Tommy took, the cartels banding together was one of those things that felt put in there to try to explain Ortega's removal and essentially finish the plotline. Since the plot was by no means the most engaging and, to be honest, we didn't need to spend any more time with it, I'll overlook how quickly it ended. Tommy flipping Grayskull was a necessary method to put a stop to the RD and D-Mac dispute, but I wasn't happy about it either, if only because we could have spent more time somewhere else. Janet was greatly despised by Grayskull. Tommy was prepared to not only drive the bus over Janet but also back it up a few times just to be safe. He hardly needed to say anything. Although I like to assume that Tommy, Shanti, and Miguel would have finally located Janet, the same thing would have happened. Tommy and company would have left CBI in ruins, and a blast from the past would have delivered what may have been the largest mic drop the show has ever seen. The intense adrenaline rush of the camera shifting to Tariq after he saved Tommy's life persisted even though everyone knew he was returning. The dramatics and theatrics of Tariq's arrival were so amazing that I'm ready to overlook the fact that he has never shot that well in his life. Even though none of the main participants were killed, the entire shootout was really skillfully done. I didn't anticipate it, but it's usually a little corny when everyone dies except for the main characters. It completely reduces the stakes, and since I'm so accustomed to power not always taking that path, I was shocked that Janet wasn't slain in that fight because everything was predicated on it being the conclusion. I apologize, Tommy should have killed Janet. You may argue that D-Mac should have killed Tommy, but in the end, Tommy had to do it because of the intense and long-standing animosity between Tommy and Janet. Even though I enjoyed watching everyone turn against Janet permanently, I was really irritated by the decision not to murder him. It's time for people to realize that if Janet is leading, his team will never win. Tommy wasn't supposed to be the leader, therefore it doesn't even matter if he is on the opposing side of the conflict, anyone might really oppose Janet and they would still prevail. That was always Diamond's responsibility, and Janet tricked himself into believing he could be him while he was away. Boo, it was never going to be you. I would still have been annoyed, but I would have accepted it if Janet had concluded the series by himself, bemoaning his shortcomings. Rather, the power gods made the decision that I could not leave this series without letting out my greatest sigh. I could tell every time they cut to Vic and Ray in their rabbit paradise that Vic would eventually return to Chicago because he is unable to control himself. He's been humiliated in every way imaginable, including another abortive attempt on Tommy's life, yet he can't get enough of Tommy Egan. To find out who has been most enamored with Tommy Egan throughout the series, we ought to conduct a poll. Would you vote for Vic? Janet? The Serbs? Before Mireya knocked him down, Miguel. One of the key reasons Vic has never been able to let go of his dispute with Tommy is that he has never been able to move past what happened with Gloria. Let's be honest about everything. His blood thumped Tommy Egan has to go every day, and it drove him back to Chicago, even though he could have lived out his days in peace with Ray and continued to snitch. My personal dread is Janet and Vic working together in any way, and since the program is over, we don't really need to witness it. But will that really be the case? Based on Tariq and Tommy's last chat, and what a conversation it was, Power Legacy appears to be a go even in the absence of a formal announcement. Allow me to express my admiration once more for the way Power Book 2, Ghost transformed Tariq from one of the most despised characters on TV into a complex yet endearing antihero. The fact that I like Tariq still surprises me occasionally, and I'm not being sarcastic. There is a lot of tension and a difficult past in Tommy and Tariq's relationship. Even though they have finally reached a point where there is a truce and they can cooperate when the necessity and opportunity arise, Tommy will never forget that Tariq killed Ghost. As they had that chat on the rooftop, which was perfectly appropriate for the two men, you could see that there was still love and respect between them. One thing about Tariq is that he is constantly planning ahead. You could see the wheels moving in Tariq's head as soon as D-Mac informed him that Tommy was expecting a child. But which way is it turning? I briefly thought whether Tariq was going to kill Tommy and we were all being tricked, but it didn't make sense. To be honest, Tommy's quick abandonment of all he worked so hard to make a reality in Chicago likewise defies logic, that is, unless you begin to consider the deeper significance of it all. Tommy has desired to be king from the start, all the way back to New York. He wanted to be king with Ghost, but as we all know, it was never going to happen for a variety of reasons. Chicago offered him both a fresh start and the opportunity to attain the elusive power he has always sought. However, once you get it, the only thing left to fight for is keeping it. And where's the excitement, joy, and fun in that? Tommy feels that going back to his house with his new family and collaborating with a more evolved Ghost that even he has to admire is about as true to himself as it gets. Tommy gained power, but it turns out that this is still insufficient. I got chills at the conclusion of the hour. From the music drop to Tommy towering above the city he had conquered with Tariq. It's difficult for those of us who have been enjoying this cosmos since 2014 to put into words all the feelings and meanings these shows evoke. It was the ideal conclusion and a prelude to what might happen next. Let me just mention Sang and Mireya in passing because they were the two other major storylines that required wrapping, and they did. Were we meant to be aware that Tommy and Sang were collaborating? If that's the case, I missed a part of the tale, but the largest real shock of the day was Sang killing Bobby. Overall, Sang doesn't matter, but I enjoy it when a story defies expectations, even if it's in a way that I find objectionable. Unfortunately, there is little you can do to stop Stacy and Bobby from becoming the faces of corruption in Chicago. Regarding Mireya, I've always been honest about not really falling for the Tommy and Mireya one true love propaganda because I've seen Tommy in other relationships, and everything about this relationship happened so fast that it never developed into something I felt was worth supporting. However, Mireya's choice to leave town quickly and in a way that reassured Tommy was one of the nicest things she has done in the whole series. While Tommy was attempting to do approximately 50 other things, he would always have her and his child in the back of his mind. She would be safe and away with people that loved her rather than just those who worked for him. Made it possible for him to enter this pivotal conflict with one less burden. Do I believe that Tommy and Mireya will have a happy ending? Mireya has shown that she cares for Tommy and is prepared to put up with all of the craziness that comes with it, which is more than many of Tommy's former acquaintances could claim. I may never be persuaded of that. I'll give Mireya 10 points for that. And I'll give the entire series a 10 because it gives us more time with Chicago, Tommy Egan, and the Power World. We shall miss you. All the other information you require. It wasn't appropriate for Diamond to have a funeral instead of a 5th grade poster. Diamond was worthy of more. My left eye twitches because Kane Tejada, Janet Sampson, and Vic Flynn are still alive in the Power universe. Talking with D-Mac and Tariq was like witnessing two of the worst people you've ever met for the first time, leaving you speechless. Tariq is no longer the worst, but I wonder whether it was similar to staring into a mirror with D-Mac's terrible judgment. We had a brief exchange between Tommy and Kate, and since this is obviously not the end of Tommy, I won't be too critical. The childhood photos and Mac lying on the ground with the rifle briefly made me feel something. I'm happy that he and JP spent that final moment together. Guys, that's it. I can't let go even though we've reached the end of the road. Even though Power never dies, these series usually have tragic conclusions. If this was the kind of ending you could enjoy or if you were hoping for a bit more, do let me know in the comments. I would be delighted to hear your opinions. And as always, I appreciate you coming along on this journey with me. Tommy Egan has never backed down from a war. Following 3 seasons, Power Book 4, Force, a spin-off to the original Power series, is coming to an end. Will Egan, Joseph Sikora, accomplish his dream to take over the streets of Chicago, or will his resentful enemies get the best of the longtime kingpin? During an interview with NBC New York, Sikora spoke about what he appreciates most about his character ahead of the gritty crime series conclusion.